Okay, people, you know that apart from showing you the fundamentals of coding in Python, we also love sharing tips and tricks. I'm 100% sure that at some point in your work, you will have to pre-process text data. So, here is a very useful tool. Python's string formatting method, format. Once we've introduced you to it, we will practice applying it to certain text data using a few tricks. Let's begin. First, let's create two Python sequences that will assist us along the way. It doesn't really matter what these sequences will be, so let the first one be a tuple called time horizon. We want it to contain the numbers 1, 3, and 12, which correspond to different common time periods. In different analyses, we may want to use or aggregate by monthly, quarterly, and yearly data, thus the example. Now, let the second sequence be a list that we'll call products. It will store two string values, product A and product B. Once we have executed these cells, we can focus on the syntax of the format method. First and foremost, please remember that the format method is applicable to string values only. You can think of such a string value as a template in which the format method will insert the values that have been designated as its arguments. Of course, it will have formatted them as text first, regardless of their initial data type. To better explain the idea, let's work with the following example. Consider this string, which will act as our template, and imagine that we wanted to involve it in such an operation that its final version becomes expected sales for a period of 12 months for product B. In other words, our goal is to eventually indicate the number of months in the place of the first pair of curly braces, and the specific product item in the place of the second pair of braces. It is important to know that technically, these pairs of braces define the placeholders where we will insert the values that have been passed as arguments of the format method. So, the deal here is that we can apply the format method to this string and pass the value 12 and product B as arguments. Once we execute this cell, we will obtain the string we were aiming for. Fantastic! However, the real beauty of using this method lies in the fact that you can pass entire objects as its arguments. Therefore, we can actually refer to the time horizon and products variables within the parentheses here. As we run the cell now, we obtain an inadequate output. We can observe that the entire tuple and list have replaced the placeholders in the string object where we are applying the format method. To improve that output, let's say we want to create the same string as before. We can do that by using indexing. That means we can indicate that we are interested in the third element of the tuple called time horizon by writing the index number 2 within brackets here. Next, we can refer to the second element of the products list by indicating the index 1 within brackets here. Execute, and great, it worked. Now that the concept of using the format method has become clearer, let's talk more about the types of parameters we can use. There are two types, positional and keyword parameters. Of course, while applying the format method into practice, we should say that we are using positional or keyword arguments, not parameters. Remember? On that note, it turns out that so far in this lecture, we have used positional arguments, as Python was converting the empty values into the numbers 0 and 1 in the background. You can think of this behavior as illustrating how Python will treat the arguments of the format method by default. Furthermore, this means that we could also refer to these arguments by explicitly specifying an index value within the placeholders. So, to obtain the same output, we can write 0 and 1 within the first and second pair of braces, respectively. Is this true? Yes, it is. To prove that using index values here can really matter, let's swap the index values between the two placeholders. Our output seems to be of the flip side, doesn't it? Okay. Therefore, we can infer that it is possible to be implicit or explicit when referencing positional arguments. Depending on the situation, you can choose one or the other option. Good. Then, here's an instance of using the second type of arguments you can have, keyword arguments, also known as named arguments. They are called this way because you can refer to them not by using an index value in the placeholders, but by using keys, which can also be thought of as their names at the same time. In addition, to be able to use keyword arguments, you have to designate the relevant key value pairs within the parentheses here. Thus, as you reference an argument by its key, the format method will insert the corresponding value within the given placeholder. So, also thinking of our example, to obtain expected sales for a period of 12 months for product B by using keyword arguments, we need to do the following. First, we can choose the abbreviations T_HOR and prod to be the keys of our arguments, and then assign the integer 12 and the string product B to them respectively. Second, we can refer to these values by typing the exact abbreviations for time horizon and products in the placeholders of our template. As we execute the code cell, we can observe that we have worked correctly. Great! Note how this resembles the everyday methods we are usually using. That is why this may be deemed the most intuitive way to use the format method. Basically, we can now say that you have just learned the essentials about using Python's format method. This allows us to go through several examples where we can complicate things a little bit and show you some tricks. Let's do that. The value of an argument need not be a single value. It can also be a list. For instance, prod can contain the strings product A and product B stored in a list. As we execute the cell now, we see that the entire list was displayed at the end. To obtain the same output as before, we can also specifically indicate in the second placeholder that we're interested in the second element from the products list. Now, the newly created string looks better, right? Furthermore, we can refer to the sequences we created in the beginning of the lecture by using them as values in our keyword arguments. To do this, we can have T_HOR equals time horizon and prod equals products within the parentheses. Let's not forget to indicate we are interested in the third element from the time horizon tuple, and then run this code. We obtain the same output again. Great! What if we wanted to attach the precise value of the expected sales in dollars at the end? To do this, we can extend our template by leaving a space, writing the $, and referring to a sales key in a third placeholder. To make the last addition relevant, without worrying too much that this line of code is becoming a little longer, we can specify at the end of it that sales equals, say, 10,000. Run this cell to see what information will be returned. Beautiful! Now we know what the expected sales are. The last trick I wanted to show you is that you can reference your arguments while using both index values and keys at the same time. So, if we decide to use an index as a reference to the first argument only, then we'll have to substitute the key written here with the number 0, as it corresponds to the position of the first argument within the parentheses of the format method. We will also have to substitute the first key value pair with the value of 12. Thus, we should be able to obtain the same output. Execute and... Yes, correct! Well, I think this lecture was a great example of how you can work with many tools in Python simultaneously. Do you agree? We intertwine knowledge of working with strings, lists, tuples, methods, parameters, arguments, indexing, and data types. And while doing all that, you learned how to use the format method. Thank you for watching.